Jansen, he's on your left. He's playing blue, white, red Delver. This is a 6-0 matchup. So presumably the first of your win and ins for top 8. And Chris Allen is playing Omnitel.
So this is a combo deck. It's a show and tell derivative, though it's not trying to sneak attack or put any creatures into play. Trying to win in one turn with the combination of Omniscience and Enter the Infinite, at which point winning the game is pretty arbitrary. To that end, it plays show and tell to cheat the trademark card into play. Dream Halls is another route to cheat the large enchantment or Enter the Infinite. And then the rest of the deck is some Force of Wills and some cantrips, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, this is a deck. It is not as explosive as Sneak and Show, but it is a little more robust as you get to play just islands as your mana base, and you get to play more offensive counter spells. There's a full 4 Pact of Negation in the deck.
So this is the upside of playing this deck as opposed to something like Show and Tell, or Sneak and Show rather. You're a little bit slower, but you're a lot more stable. You're not susceptible to Wasteland, really. And you do kill in one turn, which Show and Tell sometimes struggles to do.
Omnitel is on a 6-card hand here. We're going to get to see it. Brett Jansen on the play is going to go ahead and attack and probe him. You see a 1-lander, but it has some upside. There's a Show and Tell, a Force of Will, a Preordain, and Omniscience, and a Dream Halls. So he can put Show and Tell that Omniscience into play with Force backup. Now, he doesn't have Enter the Infinite yet, but he's got a lot of what he needs there.
Unfortunately, this is going to be one of the more challenging matchups for Chris in the room here. Blue, white, red Delver has a good mixture of pressure and some counter spells, which is typically good against combo decks, and also has 3 copies of Metallium Mage in the sideboard, which creates additional headaches post-board.
All right, it's turn 1 Preordain for Chris Allen. Remember, he does not have a second land. So first order of the day is going to be getting up to 3 mana so he can go for that Show and Tell to get Omniscience into play somehow. And Brett with second lantern. He does not have a threat down yet, so it's going to have to get one of those. And once he does, that'll be some pressure. It's going to try to set up for one with Ponder.
And that's the recipe that you need to beat these combo decks. You can't sit on your heels all day long, even if you have a bunch of counter spells. You need to get something in play, try to shorten the length of the game. That really magnifies the power of cards like Daze and Spell Pierce and so forth.
And we'll go back to Chris Allen. He does not yet shown a second land. He's going to try for Ponder, see if he can get a counter. He's not going to get that, but Brett is not going to fight over mana. He's gonna, seems like he is resolved to fight over the business spells, which I do like.
Yeah. The difference here is, you know, I think Brainstorm plus Shuffler is the type of scenario where you're supposed to be fighting. But over just a random Ponder in the dark, I think you just let that go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was some temptation, I think, to try to fight a counter war over that, mainly because he knew that Chris started the game on 1 land. But I agree that really, normally what I wish, like, if Brett had a Delver in play, this game would be going completely according to plan. It's a little worrisome for him that he has no pressure. He's going to need to find a window to cast something and then sit back.
Because eventually, given enough time, Chris is going to be able to set up a scenario where he powers through the soft permission. And then you're looking at just Force of Will as your real form of disruption.
Well, and this is something I get from playing High Tide too. Omnitel and High Tide actually, to me, are somewhat of similar decks in that they're these mono blue million cantrip combo decks. Like, if you give him enough time, he's going to get a hand which is, you know, Show and Tell, Enter the Infinite, Omniscience, Pact of Negation, Pact of Negation, Pact of Negation, Pact of Negation.
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, that's a pretty hard hand to stop from doing what it's trying to do.
In the meantime, you're drawing some equipments and some bolts, and even committing mana on your own turn becomes a cost if you want to cantrip or put something in play, because you need as much mana as possible to protect yourself from Chris going off. So,
right, and Chris just casting out his 4th cantrip of the game, and now his Brett, he is thinking if he wants to daze it. He's going to go ahead and float a blue and daze that Ponder.
Yeah, and I think Brett has finally had enough. There's enough sense of, okay, Chris is setting up a really good hand here. I need to start fighting over some of these cantrips. Additionally, my daze is going to get worse pretty soon. If Chris is able to play a 4th land and Show and Tell, then the daze offers no defense that turn. So I like Brett waiting to see if he could snag something of higher value like Show and Tell. But given the way the game was going, I think Brett made the right choice there in stopping that Ponder.
And he's now going to use that Brainstorm with the blue mana he had and do an end-step Brainstorm. This one actually pretty decent because he has the fetch land for it. He had the mana there. going to go reset the top of his deck. And I like this because he does need to find some action, so this Brainstorm should hopefully draw him into some. He really needs to get Chris down from, start getting Chris down from 19.
It is the problem with blue-white-red Delver. It's kind of the slowest of the Delver decks. The upshot is you get a much better creature matchup because you have Stoneforge Mystic for Batterskull and Umezawa's Jitte, and True Name Nemesis. It's a really powerful set of stuff to have against other creature decks. You do pay some costs in the combo matchups, which aren't nearly as good as they are for other styles of Delver decks.
Well, the deck's interesting. To me, it doesn't have a clear game plan. Its game plan's really adaptive. You know, like, so you have Delver starts, and then you have Counterspell Swords, Stoneforge starts. And it's like, you can, the good part about the deck is that it can adapt and board to become whichever deck it needs to become. I mean, it has game in almost every matchup, but sometimes you can get the wrong half of the deck for the matchup you're playing. And Jackson Probe shows a vastly improved hand for Chris Allen. He does not have the Omniscience yet, but he does, or the Enter the Infinite. But he does have 2 Force of Wills, a Show and Tell, a Dream Halls, an Omniscience, and a Cunning Wish. Looking at his wish board, he does have an Intuition in the wish board, so if he resolves this Omniscience, he can, if he Show and Tells into this Omniscience, he can full combo. The Cunning Wish does turn into an Enter the Infinite.
And Chris is able to just, if he wants to, use the Cunning Wish as almost a test spell this turn. It's a non-essential piece. He doesn't need it to win the game, but the Cunning Wish may be good enough to induce some sort of counter from Brett. Even a Daze here is not bad. So
yeah,
this is the problem with Brett not applying any pressure, is now he gets into this spot where there's only so many counter spells in the deck. There's 3 Spell Pierces, 4 Daze, 4 Force of Wills. There's a Daze already gone, and how much resistance can you really provide when all these test spells require some sort of answer?
He has a couple options. He can use this as a test spell to get a counter spell, and that seems fine. It also would be a card that's good. Like, I don't want to fight a counter war over this Cunning Wish. He's going to do that. Pitching Dream Halls, I imagine. Dream Hall's not really a card in this hand.
And I like fighting over this from Chris's side because of the counterspell that Brett led with. It's one of those things where if Brett initiates with Daze, you say to yourself, well, he could have something else going on here. He could have a Spell Pierce. I don't really want to fight this fight. When he opens up with a Spell Pierce, it implies that the rest of his counterspells are probably Dazes and Pierces, although it looks like he does have a Daze left over.
Yeah, I would have. I mean, he is tapping Brett low here, but the thing is that Brett now knows, like, so Chris can resolve this Omniscience. That's great, but he actually doesn't have a combo anymore because he got rid of the Cunning Wish.
Well, once the Omniscience is in play, he has all day. I mean, this card's not leaving play once it's in.
Yeah, his draw for the turn was Pact of Negation. So it looks like he's going to pass the turn. He does need to draw. I mean, there's no reason, like, Omniscience. Yeah, once he gets in play, it's fine. He doesn't really want to let Brett Show and Tell something into play if possible. But
well,
every draw is great for Chris here.
What's Brett going to Show and Tell into play? Anything he would have cast by now. The only real risk is if he has Batterskull in hand, which I guess is enough of a reason not to do it that maybe you're supposed to hold off.
He's got to have something in his hand, right? So he doesn't have any, like, look at the cards on this list. I don't believe that Brett's entire hand is lands. So cards he could have. He could have a bunch of lightning bolts. That would make sense. He could have some counter spells.
Swords
and he could have a Batterskull. Swords, dead swords. But he's been brainstorming enough that I don't put him on more than one. I put him on 0 to 1 swords. Like, those guys would have to just be the immediate cards you shuffle away every time with your brainstorm.
Sure.
So I would put Brett on having counter spells, bolts, and maybe some equipment. Maybe a Batterskull is not an unreasonable thing to think that Brett would have. Brainstorm again for Brett Jansen. Finds True Name Nemesis. That's something that he can work with.
Now, True Name Nemesis is not his ideal threat for the matchup, but it is something.
It'll do here, yeah. And he's gotta work quickly. You don't want to give the mono blue decks, given enough time, will combo you. And he's just going to go ahead and play True Name. And this is, I think, why I wasn't as big a fan of that Cunning Wish. Like, I would rather that Brett still had all those counter spells in his hand, that now we just got to fight one big slog of a counter war. Wait till he taps for something and then just fight him real big.
Well, the problem is, from that side of things, is that it's really very low cost for Brett to keep all of his counter spells up because they're all 0 mana or 1. It's not like if he was playing with counter spells and cryptic commands and things like that, I definitely agree with you. But with his counterspells being basically free for him to leave up the whole game, I think you have to kind of
It doesn't matter when you get them.
Yeah. Brett's also kind of showing this willingness of leaving up all of his mana. Now, maybe he didn't have a threat, but, you know, it's hard to imagine he's going to tap himself low enough where he, you know, can't cast the second Spell Pierce in his hand and dies. He's not really playing the game where that looks like a possibility.
Chris has found Enter the Infinite this turn, which means he has the full combo. There is some debate here whether he can try to go off this turn, but the problem with the danger of going off this turn is that all of Brett's Spell Pierces and Dazes are live on this turn. Chris could wait and maybe try the turn with a 5th land before he combos. And if he waited and did that, it's possible he could neutralize one of Brett's threats.
Well, he may be able to just open on Show and Tell and at the minimum say, I can pay for Spell Pierce or 2 Dazes. And it looks like, by the look of things, that Chris's hand is more than set up to fight over Force of Wills. I mean, there's Force of Wills and Pact of Negations in his hand. So it's really only an overload of soft permission that Chris has to be that concerned with.
So you can take a couple turns to get some extra lands here. He draws a second Enter the Infinite. That's actually fine because he does have Force of Wills here. His one concern, I think he can buy one more turn. He's got to be concerned with multiple Lightning Bolts finishing the job early.
That's a big risk here. I mean, he's going to 7 from this attack, which means that if he pays for Force of Will, he is now dead to 2 bolts. So
yeah,
we're now in the range of something bad could happen, though.
Yeah, he drew another Pact of Negation, and this has got to be game time now. He has 4 offensive counter spells at use here, which, like I said, this is what I mean when I say, like, it's real hard to fight through this. So here we go. Show and Tell is the first one from Chris. Spell Pierce. And he's going to Force of Will it, pitching what I have to think is a copy of Enter the Infinite. Chris does go down to 6 with that, opening a door for a double Lightning Bolt.
This is a pretty common play pattern in Legacy. Both players set up their hands for a while with some cantrips, and now it's time for some fireworks.
So another Spell Pierce. This one's going to get Pact of Negation. This is why it's really hard to play the defensive game against blue combo. A Brainstorm for Brad. That signals that he's out and now looking for more.
Yeah, it's a good sign for Chris.
I don't think I want to fight over this if I'm Chris. Yeah, he draws Bolt and some fetches. And does he have 2 Lightning Bolts? That's the question.
No, I don't think he has double red.
Yeah, and even if he did, you could just... A Bolt really is just another counter spell here. It's another card you have to counter.
It's Spell Pierce Part 2, basically.
Yeah, it's just a red Spell Pierce, so it's fine. You don't play differently around Lightning Bolt than you would around Spell Pierce. So, doesn't look like he found anything else. Looks like this is going to resolve.
And even still, Chris, I think Chris has more left in the chamber. I think he has at least another Pact of Negation and a Force of Will, so.
Oh, yeah. He started this turn. He did the real greedy blue thing where he waited until he had 8 cards in hand before he fought the counter war. Now Force of Will comes out of Brett's hand. He let the stack resolve and is going to go again. Pact of Negation. Going to happen there. Brett is wisely targeting all these counterspells at, and he was at Show and Tell, so that all the packs do resolve. So Show and Tell works. Omniscience is in play for Chris Allen. Now without having to pay mana costs, he gets to go. Enter the Infinite's going to happen. If you haven't seen this before, he's going to win.
Well, hold on. If Chris has found 2 bolts, he now has a Misty Rainforest in play. He can cast in response to this Enter the Infinite.
Right, but there is 1 Force of Will left in Chris's hand, which he can cast for 0. He no longer needs the blue card to cast it. Because they enter the because Omniscience
assuming his
resolved.
last card in his hand is a counter spell.
I believe it was a second Force of Will, but they didn't have a blue card for. But now it's live, thanks to Omniscience.
And there are 3 Volcanics in Brett's list. So this is Brett's last shot here.
He's going to Lightning Bolt Chris once. He can let that resolve. That's fine. And is he allowed to draw his whole deck? Sure is. He's going to go do that.
Oh, Brett has already found his 3rd Volcanic. Okay, so that it doesn't even
have
matter.
A red mana in his deck. Now, Chris resolved 2 Pacts and Negations here, so he has to be a little careful.
Well, he's just winning this turn.
Yeah, it's...
He's fine. So he's going to drop his whole deck.
Put
Dream
Emrakul on
Halls
top.
Yeah, he puts Emrakul on top as the last card in his deck left over with End for the Infinites. This allows him to Cunning Wish for release the Ants. You presumably win all the clashes with an Emrakul on top of your deck or an Enter the Infinites or what have you. And you repeat as desired.
Yeah, Brett Jansen walking through, he said, hey, I had that other Lightning Bolt, didn't have the red. Chris was like, well, my last card was a Force. I had you covered.
Yeah, I guess what needs to happen there is if Brett does have access to the second Volcanic, he needs to respond to the Show and Tell. Because then at that point, he at least beats Force of Will plus Enter the Infinites. Because
but he
forces
can't
a Force
do
of Will.
that because he didn't have, like, the reason he was able to make that play was because he Show and Tell the land into play. That's what gave him the extra
right,
fetch.
yeah. He's
So, yeah, so I don't think he actually has a way to do it.
correct.
Game 1 goes to Chris Allen and Omnitel. Remember, these players at 6-0, so this is our first top 8 match.
Now, fortunately for Brett, he does get to clean this matchup up a little bit post-board. He gets to get rid of the Swords to Plowshares, some of the less efficient things like Umezawa's Jitte, maybe even the Batter Skull, I'm not even sure. Well, I guess he has different equipment to go to here. Sideboard of a Graftaker's Cage, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Flusterstorms, a Wear Tear, 3 Meddling Mage, Aethersworn Canonist, Grimloft Mancer, Swords to Plowshares, Sword of Feast and Famine. You got a lot what's going on in this deck post-board.
I mean, these Delver decks have always been very good post-board against combo. So yeah, let's start with the things he can do here. He does have 2 Pyroblast. Those are excellent here. He has 3 Meddling Mage. Those are also really good here.
Well, furthermore, Flusterstorm's excellent. Aethersworn Canonist is excellent. He gets to turn his equipment package into Sword of Feast and Famine, which is a big upgrade over Umezawa's Jitte and Batter Skull. So he gets to improve his deck substantially post-board.
Yeah, absolutely. So he gets a lot of those to board in, and more importantly, he gets to board out some real losers in the matchup. Umezawa's Jitte, Swords to Plowshares, even True Name Nemesis. These cards are really bad in the matchup.
He may want to keep in True Name just to remain threat dense enough. You know, there's a certain saturation of creatures he needs to be able to get off to a steady start.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Those things can easily go. I think, 3 Swords to Plowshares, Batter Skull, Umezawa's Jitte are all easy cuts, and then after that, True Name Nemesis, maybe some number of the Lightning Bolts. There's other cuts he can make in this matchup. So
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I actually like the Lightning Bolts as Lava Spikes more than the True Names, namely because, I think if he's tapping on turn 3 to get to, he doesn't have a good window to cast True Name in this matchup. It's a 3 power for 3, right? So it's like this Trained Armadon in the matchup, and while, yeah, it's a creature, it's not a turn where he wants to tap out, and I don't really think it's fast enough to justify tapping out 4.
especially post-board, he's bringing in Pyroblast and Flusterstorm, so he already has more demands on his mana than he has in Game 1, where most of his counter spells are Dazes and Force of Wills and so forth. I agree with you that it can go. I think Plows, Batter Skull, and Umezawa's Jitte are higher priorities to get out of the deck, but there are 7 easy cuts that I identify. On the other side, a lot of Chris's sideboard is taken up with Cunning Wish targets. There's an Intuition to release the Ants, a Wipe Away, an Echoing Truth, a Rushing River, and a Trick Bind. So these are unlikely to come in, obviously. There's 3 copies of Spell Pierce, 3 Ley Lines of Sanctity, and 3 Defense Grids. Of this, I think you're just going to see the Defense Grids come in. Pretty solid against Brett, especially if you anticipate him bringing in a lot more counter spells.
Yeah, so basically what each of those are for is Defense Grid is for control decks, Ley Line is for discard decks, and Spell Pierce is for guys who are faster than you.
Or potentially other combo decks.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, some combo decks, if you're like the Omnitel Allurin matchup, for example, you don't even care about Spell Pierce. You just kill them.
Yes.
So yeah, but guys who are fast than you, so say like Storm, Sneak and Show, Reanimator, Belcher, those kind of decks you probably would want Spell Pierce against.
But a pretty straightforward sideboard, and there's room here. You can get away from some number of the cantrips or some number of the counter spells as required, and bring in your defense grids.
Actually don't really like Force of Will much in this matchup. It's fine, but the extra card, you'd rather just get Pact of Negations, and you have so much cantrip that you can probably do that.
Because you're only fighting counterspell wars the turn you're trying to kill someone, and then Force of Will is just a lot less efficient than Pact of Negation.
Yeah. A good way I like to think about it is you're using your counter spells offensively instead of defensively, and Force of Will is a pretty bad offensive counter spell. You have to have another blue card in your hand to use it. You can't set. It's hard to set up with the 3 combo pieces plus lots of counter spells, and your counter spells are Force of Wills.
And this is the start that Brett needs right here.
Turn 1 Delver of Secrets for Brett Jansen. Chris will have a turn 1 Ponder, but you're absolutely right. This is what he was missing last game. He actually, I think, survived for enough turns. He survived he survived for as many turns as you can really hope to survive for with Blue White Red Delver. I think it was like turn 7 or 8.
Yeah. He drew a lot of counter spells. I mean, I think he drew all 3 of his spell pierces, multiple dazes, force of will. He had a lot of his counter spells.
You don't want to actually try to be a control deck against Omnitel. Like, even with all these sideboarded counter spells that he boarded in, eventually he will lose the counter war. You know, Chris can just keep amassing more offensive spells, and he will break through.
It's hard, you know, if you're used to playing, you know, normal formats or less powered formats.
With like
you just
a control deck, right?
Yeah, you just assume that your deck of counter spells is really good against someone who needs to resolve one big spell, but Legacy does not work that way.
Yeah, especially not with these mono blue combo decks. They are good at resolving one spell. That is, you know, they either will have a million pact negations or they'll try to do things like silence you, or they won't fight fair when the counter war happens.
No. And we saw that last game. I mean, Chris was just a boatload of pact negations he obviously had no intent of paying the upkeep for.
Yeah. You see other weapons that decks use, cards like Defense Grid, Xantid Swarm. There's a lot of these tools in Legacy that let you break through a counterspell wall.
It needs to be a mixture. The best recipes for beating combo decks in my mind are a mixture of pressure and counter spells and discard, something where they can't pinpoint one place to attack you on. They can't trump you with something like you mentioned, one Defense Grid or one Xantid Swarm or one Leyline of Sanctity or so forth. You have a diverse set of disruption. That's the best plan.
Yeah, and really the easiest plan is to just kill them. You know, if you can end the game, like end the game. Don't get, you know, and that's like what this Delver's doing. Don't give them time to get whatever they're trying to do online. So this Delver can chip away 3 a turn at Chris Allen. And now Brett doesn't really need to tap out ever again. He can maybe play a couple more cantrips, maybe this turn, maybe one more next turn, and after that he's probably just going to sit back with some lands and hit him with a Delver.
Try to close the game out as quickly as possible and force Chris to play in the soft permission.
You'll see here, Wasteland. And one of the advantages to Omnitel is you are pretty much immune to Wasteland. There are 4, he actually is going with Ancient Tombs instead of City of Traders, but either's fine. He has those 5 soul lands, or lands that tap for 2, but the biggest problem is that Chris doesn't play those until the turn he plans to tap them.
Yeah, they are incidental.
Yeah, you can't really waste him. And now he's going to force Brett to burn some of his counterspells before the big fight. He's going to go for a Defense Grid. Fortunately for Brett, it's only 1 counterspell he's going to have to use here instead of multiple.
And this is pretty fortunate because a lot of Brett's sideboarded counterspells do not touch Defense Grid. He's bringing Flusterstorm, he's bringing Pyroblast. So there's a good chance that Brett just gets caught down there with his pants down, can't answer Defense Grid, and then loses the game next turn.
Right. Delver hits Chris down to 11. And a second threat looks like Stoneforge Mystic or Meddling Mage. I was gonna say it's gonna try to increase the clock. Meddling Mage is just gonna be a general nuisance. And
I would imagine he's naming Show and Tell here, and he is.
You can name Show and Tell here. Yeah, there's some danger because Chris can actually just play a Dream Halls and go that route. If you can cast Dream Halls, you can cast Enter the Infinite off it.
Well, it's a lot of it has to do with how much time is left in the game. There's, you know, it's a 2-turn clock now, and Show and Tell seems much more realistic for Chris to push through with his counterspells than Dream Halls. He needs more mana to even get to that stage.
I'm wondering whether or not you just name Enter the Infinite. So the danger there would be that Chris would Show and Tell an Omniscience into play and then Cunning Wish for a bounce spell, bounce the Meddling Mage, and then play his Enter the Infinite. But that's like actually a lot of cards, and he probably can't do that and fight a counter war.
Yeah.
I'm actually a little on the side of naming Enter the Infinite in that situation. But I mean, Show and Tell's not a bad name, especially not when you see that Chris doesn't have any more than 3 lands. Then you feel really good about it.
It's the safest name is part of it too.
Maybe. I don't know. I still want to name Enter.
There is also the possibility, it may be slim, but you do that and then Chris goes untap, Show and Tell in, Embercool kill you.
Yeah, he does have the one of Emrakul, and that can happen. So you are right. He is playing with that risk.
It's one of those things where anything that you name realistically, Enter the Infinite, Show and Tell, they're all going to be fine. They all incur some weird backdoor risk. The one that you mentioned about he's able to Cunning Wish, or Emrakul's in the equation somehow.
He has to dream. I mean, he'd have to Dream Halls. And the hard part is, like, if you have Dream Halls right, so
And looking through
Yeah,
Chris's sideboard there, he removed all of his copies of Pact Negation. He got away from that altogether.
Yeah, here you said he removed all his copies of Pact Negation?
They were all in his sideboard. All copies.
Interesting.
Were in his sideboard.
Okay. So, well, I mean, he's bringing in if Defense Grid is truly his plan, then that's what he does. And you see here, he's going to go for a Dream Halls, and that's going to, we see in response, he's going to get Lightning Bolted, Pact Negation from Chris, and this is the danger of, I think, of naming Show and Tell.
Well, it was all predicated on Chris having his 1 2-mana land here. Oh, I guess he has
five.
5 copies. Sorry,
Yeah.
excuse me. He has 5 copies.
Is that if he has a blue card and Enter the Infinite, he can win off this. You draw your whole deck, then you pitch another blue card, cast Omniscience, then you do the same thing that you would have done with Omniscience. And he's going to try to Pyroblast the Pact of Negation. Does Chris have another offensive counterspell? Does he have a Force or a Pact? He does not. We're on to game 3.
So that's the difference between Delver and True Name Nemesis in this matchup right there.
Yeah. Delver's great.
Chris has a pretty powerful hand there. You know, with more time, he can get it set up, but Brett just didn't give it to him.
I mean, Brett was 1 Pact of Negation or 1 Force of Will from having lost that game. So it was close. Had Chris set up a little differently, like Chris had a chance.
Yeah. These decks are dangerous.
And we will be on a game 3. Chris will be on the play. Play versus draw, relevant, not hugely relevant here. A lot of this matchup, I think, puts an onus on Brett. Chris's deck does kind of the same thing every game. I mean, that happens when you play a deck that starts with, it starts with 12 cantrips.
Yeah, 4 Preordain, 4 Ponder, 4 Brainstorm. I'm going to be able to assemble my hand. The real question is, how long does it take me to do it? And how much backup do I have when I'm finally ready to go?
Right.
It's not a question of whether or not he's going to miss it altogether. And that's a big difference between this deck and Sneak and Show in my mind. Sneak and Show does draw keepable hands where I'm missing a piece, and I hope that I have the ability to get there. And will fail a good percentage of the time. Omnitel, that's very unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the advantage of having even better mana, no susceptibility to wasteland, better mana, and an additional 4 cantrips.
Yeah.
But what you do lose in the deck is that, first of all, you're a 3-card combo, not a 2-card combo. And you lose, Sneak Attack is a little more of an oops, I win card. You know, sometimes you just have hands where, you can have Sneak Attack and a couple petals, and you just, turn 2 kill them.
You also lose out on the red cards, which is not a minor thing. In this matchup, I'm sure Chris would love to have access to something like Pyroclasm, which you get in the Sneak and Show deck, which, of course, he's not able to play. There's trade-offs no matter what. Sneak and Show definitely the more popular deck. In my mind, the slightly better of the two decks, but Omnitel does have its incentives.
I would agree. I personally would like playing Omnitel more, but I do think it is a slightly worse deck.
You see the Sneak and Show just jam experience, you just had to play your cards and hope it's not there. Omnitel doesn't really have to do that. It can set up these hands where, game 1, Chris was able to push through 4 or 5 counter spells on the turn that he would actually try to go off.
Cantripping is just about the best. And this deck does it all the time. Ancient Tomb. So Chris has a good start here. Ancient Tomb Defense Grid on the play.
Yep. This is one of the more dangerous openings if you're on Brett's side of the table.
I would think so. You look at Brett's hand, Spell Pierce are 2. Okay, that's where we start. Good luck.
Yep. And you had to Force of Will it because you don't get to Force of Will for the rest of the game. Or you probably don't.
When I play High Tide, I'm jealous of that start, okay? Because there are defense grids in my sideboard, and I never get to do that. But that's pretty sweet.
Also, for my money, Defense Grid from Urza's Legacy, the best looking foil in the history of Magic.
Oh, that little green streak going across it is
the best.
Yeah.
When I first got into Magic, there was one, foils were really expensive. Legacy was the first.
Yeah, because there are really few of them, right?
And it was not really even played in any decks, and one was in the store case, I don't know, for 20 or 25 bucks because all the foil rares were worth infinite. I almost bought it because I was just like, this thing looks just way too sweet. I'm sure now it's
you probably should have bought
$40,000 or whatever the Legacy foils are worth now.
I know Legacy foils are just random rares tend to be $50 cards or something like that. I see Brett trying to. So Brett's got to be fast now. He's got to turn on the aggro half of his deck. He did get the Wasteland on Ancient Tomb, and that's going to go a long ways for him. But he's going to need some creatures, maybe some meddling mages. That would probably be his best tools right now.
Yeah. But you hit it right on the head. The emphasis is to be fast at this point because he can no longer hold off Chris realistically.
And Chris, he brainstorms here. He's going to get to shuffle some of his bad cards. He has some Force of Wills and Spell Pierces that he drew. So he puts a Force of Will and Spell Pierce back on top of his deck with Brainstorm. Now he's going to crack a fetch land. So a pretty unfair sequence of events there. Chris really just cast a Ancestral Recall.
This is a capital L legacy opening from here from Chris. This guy is not messing around this game. All your Bloodbraid Elves and Liliana of the Veils, leave those at home.
Why, if you could just play islands, why would you play any other colors? It just emphasizes that blue does everything.
Certainly in Legacy it does. At times it's even been the best beatdown deck.
I mean, in Standard, it's possible. It has a good argument for best beatdown deck.
Yep.
I know, like that's a great deck, but it's a beatdown deck that you can sideboard into a bunch of counter spells and become this control deck. Sweet.
So it's really important for this card to be Meddling Mage.
Yep. I mean, that's his best weapon because he can't leave up any of these counter spells. So, but at the same time, remember, Defense Grid is reciprocal, so those Forcibles in Chris's hand are just about as dead as Brett's Spell Pierces.
Well, not necessarily, because it could get to a spot where Brett, he has a Meddling Mage or some clock in play. He's hitting and leaving up 3 mana. So the Force of Wills can still be used as offensive counter spells on his own turn.
Yeah, Brett, I think Brett needs 4 mana to fight because he has to pay for the Spell Pierce and then pay 3 more.
For Force of Will, it's 3.
For Force of Will, it's 3. We do see Jutaxian Probe from Brett, so we can see what we're playing against. Enter the Infinite, Cunning Wish, Force of Will, 2 more lands.
So if the follow-up pair is Meddling Mage, this is a pretty nice setup here for Brett.
Yeah, so what you can do is you can Cunning Wish for Intuition and Intuition for Dream Halls. And that line will establish the combo with just the cards in Chris's hand. Obviously, that line's pretty slow. It's what, a turn 3 Cunning Wish, turn 4 Intuition, turn 5 if you have the land, Dream Halls, and provide you a blue card, which you probably do, then you can cast Enter. So that works. Chris would like to find a sequence where he can do it on turn 4, and there are some draws that can make him do that. The hard decision for Chris will be if, say, he draws a Ponder next turn, as to whether or not he wants to try to Ponder for a faster kill or just take the turn 5 line.
Yeah.
And I actually think the answer is take the turn 5 line, but it's not intuitive. And Brett has a Meddling Mage, but opts for Stoneforge Mystic here.
Not a big fan of this because I feel like you need to protect yourself from Chris just casting the Cunning Wish. Although I still guess that Brett can just name whatever he goes and gets with Cunning Wish.
Yeah, actually, I mean, Cunning Wish isn't a problem at all, right? Brett plays it next. You can't get around it with Cunning Wish. And Brett opts for Batter Skull over the Sword of Feast and Famine, which is fine. It's fast. I still think I'd like Sword, but
I mean, Chris is going to be pretty light on resources soon.
Yeah.
Although maybe it's just too slow, especially, you Meddling Made something, and then the first sword hit is basically free for Chris to discard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of the presence of Batterskull in the deck, period, post-board, but...
Chris draws land 5. Remember that he's going to have to Cunning Wish main phase here because of his own defense grid. That Meddling Mage is going to get him in a pretty good way.
Yeah.
As I imagine this is going to be a Cunning Wish for Intuition, because that's setting up for a turn 5 kill. That is actually, that line oftentimes is the reason they play a full 3 Dream Halls in the number of Dream Halls in the main is 3, so it still enables that line.
Yeah, 3 is the magic number in any Intuition deck.
So he's going to Cunning Wish for Intuition. Brett's going to get a blowout here with Meddling Mage. Yep. I would guess this is naming Intuition. And that was indeed the name, so he got Chris to waste a turn here. But that said, he's still not doing that much damage. There is still some danger. Chris could, of course, just draw a Dream Halls, and then that gets him.
Yeah.
He does have a 3 outs. He does that, and he has 12 cantrips, so that's not unreasonable. His draw with a second Enter the Infinite there, that one's not particularly helpful. As Chris bashes in with Meddling Mage, Brett hits with Meddling Mage, dropping Chris down to 13.
These sideboard cards from Brett have done some real work in these games.
Meddling Mage is a pretty good beating for this deck. It's good because it operates under defense grid, and that draw was Chris just drew Dream Halls.
Yeah, I don't think Brett can put up enough resistance against this.
Well, he has 4 mana. He can actually Spell Pierce and pay.
Although Chris has a Force of Will
And
or
a
Pact in his hand, so I just don't think Brett
Yeah.
can win a counter war or anything at this point because of the defense grid.
Yeah, it's definitely true. If he forces pitching Enter the Infinite, I don't know if he has a 5th blue card, so I'm not sure he can cast the 2nd Enter. He might have to wait a turn until he draws another blue card.
Well, he gets to pitch the Intuition. That's a freebie.
Oh, the Intuition. So he has Intuition and 2nd Enter, which are both freebies to pitch. So one pitches to Force Will, the other one pitches to cast Enter. He should be good here.
Yeah, I do not believe Brett can get out of this, but we will find out momentarily.
That was the draw Chris needed. This is the danger Dream Halls. That's what he was going to Intuition for anyway.
Yeah, Brett's trying to see if there's any way maybe to cobble together 2 counterspells here, but that's just not possible. Force of Will requires an extra 3.
Yeah, looking at defense grid here, I mean, Brett can only cast 1 spell.
Yeah.
If the spell is Flusterstorm, he's good.
Well, he can't even Flusterstorm the
can't
Dream
Flusterstorm
Halls.
Dream
He
Halls.
can't even initiate it with.
You can Flusterstorm the Enter the Infinite when he plays
Sure.
Enter the Infinite. And that would be the one counter war that Brett could win. It doesn't mean your opponent has a Dream Halls in play, but Dream Halls isn't as scary as Omniscience because it requires a lot of gas to keep it going. You're pitching a card every time you play something.
Yeah.
There have been some lists that, in order to refuel and continue a couple sideboard lines, played Firemind's Foresight in the board just to continue Dream Hall's chains, which is kind of a neat trick.
Oh,
I
so
don't think
because
he's
you're
using
plus
it.
1 card plus it's a tutor.
Yeah, it's so
Oh.
you tutor for 3 blue. You pitch it and to play it, and then you tutor for 3 blue cards.
That's
and
pretty sweet.
Yeah, and one of them's like one of them can be a combo piece. You can tutor for another Cunning Wish as your 3, so you plus 1 blue card yourself. There's a lot of really sweet cards. Sometimes he will play an Eladamri's Call, and Spell Pierce can be cast, but force pitching Enter. And he was trying to Spell Pierce the Enter the Infinite. That's not going to work, and now Chris is going to draw his whole deck, and that should be lights out.
Yeah, we've seen this before. Picks up his whole deck, puts Emrakul or Enter the Infinite on top, releases the Yance over and over again, and that does it.
And Enter resolves. That should do it. If you're Brett, you want to make sure that he kept all the necessary pieces in. Make sure he has another Cunning Wish in the deck, which he does. He has no shortage of blue cards. So the first thing you do is you pitch him to play an Omniscience.
You upgrade your Dream Halls.
Yep. Once you have Omniscience and play Dream Halls, doesn't do anything. Now you can play everything else. That should be good enough. He's going to just cast Emrakul. Well, with Brett at 15, that should be good enough here.
That's a pretty fun way to do it, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And release the Ants, and he's just got it all going on.
Yeah.
All right, so that is it. Chris Allen, 2-1. He moves to 7-0. He is in your top 8.
Yeah, definitely double draw territory now. Brett Jansen still with a shot. I mean, not out of the tournament by any means. Very impressive stuff there by Chris. Slogged through a tough matchup, a lot of sideboard hate, and demonstrated the power of a deck like this round.
Yeah.